The road stretched ahead of me, a desolate ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness of the night. I had been driving for hours, trying to make it to the next town before exhaustion took over. The radio played a soft, eerie tune that seemed to match the emptiness of the surroundings. My fuel gauge was hovering dangerously close to empty, so when I saw the glow of a gas station up ahead, relief flooded through me. I pulled into the station's parking lot, the gravel crunching under my tires. The place looked like it had seen better days, its sign flickering in the dim light. The windows of the small convenience store were smudged, and the fluorescent lights inside cast an eerie glow on the scene. The night air was chilly as I stepped out of my car, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of my engine. I made my way towards the entrance, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. As I pushed open the creaky door, a gust of cold air rushed out to meet me. The smell of stale coffee and motor oil hung in the air, creating an odd mixture that made my nose wrinkle. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, casting harsh shadows on the aisles of snacks and dusty shelves. I glanced around, half expecting to see a lone figure behind the counter, but the place was empty. A small bell above the door had tinkled when I entered, but there was no sign of movement. I let out a nervous chuckle, trying to shake off the strange feeling that was creeping over me. I headed over to the back corner where the coffee machine stood. The hum of the refrigerators filled the air, and the flickering lights seemed to cast strange shapes on the walls. As I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee, I noticed a handwritten sign taped to the counter. It read, "Sorry, restroom out of order." Frowning, I took a sip of the coffee and turned to the rows of shelves. The dim light made the snacks and drinks look almost eerie, their packaging slightly distorted. I grabbed a bag of chips and a candy bar, my footsteps echoing as I made my way towards the counter to pay. I stood there for a moment, waiting for someone to appear. The silence was oppressive, and a shiver ran down my spine. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering slightly. No response. I felt a prickle of unease crawl up my neck, and I glanced around again, half expecting to see a pair of eyes watching me from the shadows. Just as I was about to set down my items and leave, a sound reached my ears. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a soft whisper, carried by the wind outside. My heart raced, and I strained to hear it again. Nothing. Maybe it was just my imagination, playing tricks on me in this deserted place. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe the cashier had stepped away for a moment, or maybe they were in the back, out of sight. I set my items on the counter and reached for my wallet, ready to pay and get out of there as quickly as possible. But then, just as I was about to call out again, a sudden knock echoed through the store. 3 distinct knocks, rhythmic and deliberate. My blood ran cold, and I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach as I looked around, searching for the source of the sound. The knock had come from the direction of the entrance, and I slowly turned my gaze towards the door. My hand tightened around my wallet, my fingers trembling. The seconds stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity, as I waited for something, anything, to happen. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerators. I strained my ears, hoping to catch any hint of movement, but there was nothing. Just the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Summoning my courage, I took a cautious step towards the door. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the sound of my own footsteps. Another step, and then another. The bell above the door tinkled softly as a gust of wind swept through, making me jump. I reached the door and peered outside, my heart still racing. The gas station's parking lot stretched before me, bathed in the pale glow of the flickering lights. But there was no one in sight. No mysterious figure, no lurking presence. I let out a shaky breath, feeling a mixture of relief and confusion. What had caused that knock? Was it just the wind, playing tricks on my imagination? Or had someone, or something, been trying to get my attention? I turned back towards the counter, my eyes narrowing as I scanned the dimly lit interior. The silence still hung in the air, and an unsettling feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. I considered leaving my items on the counter and making a hasty retreat, but something compelled me to stay just a moment longer. As I stood there, my gaze fixed on the spot where I had set down my items, I noticed a subtle movement out of the corner of my eye. It was so faint, almost imperceptible, but I knew I had seen something. A shadow, shifting in the darkness. My heart skipped a beat, and I slowly turned my head towards the source of the movement. There, at the far end of one of the aisles, I saw a figure. It was hunched over, partially hidden by the shelves, and it was moving with a slow, deliberate creep. Fear clawed at my chest as I watched the figure move. It was as if they were trying to remain hidden, creeping from one aisle to another, always staying just out of my direct line of sight. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, to run out of that gas station and never look back. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. I was frozen in place, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Who was this person? What were they doing? Why were they acting so strangely? The figure continued its slow, deliberate movements, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest, and that's when the figure stopped. It turned its head towards me, and even from this distance, I could feel its eyes on me. A chill ran down my spine as our gazes locked. The figure's eyes were dark, devoid of any emotion or expression. It felt as though they were staring right through me, seeing every fear and uncertainty that churned within me. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure turned and disappeared behind the shelves, leaving me standing there in the eerie silence of the gas station. I took another step back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I needed to get out of there, and I needed to do it now. I turned on my heels and practically sprinted towards the entrance, the bell above the door jingling loudly as I burst outside. The cool night air hit me like a welcome relief, and I stumbled a few steps before stopping to catch my breath. I glanced back at the gas station, my heart still racing. The fluorescent lights continued to flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. But there was no sign of the figure, no movement in the windows or aisles. With a final glance, I hurried to my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my keys. I practically jumped into the driver's seat, my heart still pounding in my chest. As I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the gas station's parking lot, leaving the unsettling silence behind me. As I sped away, the gas station faded into the distance, and a shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something truly sinister. The memory of that figure's cold, unfeeling eyes haunted my thoughts, and I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I had stayed even a moment longer. To this day, I avoid that stretch of road at night, unable to shake the eerie encounter that had unfolded in that seemingly ordinary gas station. Working the night shift at a gas station was never my dream job, but circumstances had led me here. The monotony of the night was broken only by the occasional hum of cars passing by on the deserted road. I had gotten used to the quiet and the isolation, finding solace in the routine tasks and the subtle glow of the fluorescent lights. One regular, however, had managed to disrupt that sense of comfort. His name was Frank, a tall and wiry man with a scruffy beard and a perpetually disheveled appearance. He would stumble in almost every night, the pungent scent of alcohol preceding his entrance. I'd watch as he'd fumble through the aisles, grabbing a pack of cigarettes, a tall can of beer, and some snacks, before making his way to the counter. "Evening, Laura," he'd slur, his words muddled and his eyes glassy. "Good evening, Frank," I'd reply with a forced smile, trying to ignore the unease that his presence brought. I'd ring up his purchases and take his money, always counting the seconds until he'd leave. But it wasn't just his drunkenness that set me on edge, it was the way he'd stare. His gaze would linger a beat too long, his bloodshot eyes locking onto mine as if he were trying to read my thoughts. It made my skin crawl, and I'd do my best to keep my composure while he stood there, swaying slightly. One night, as Frank stumbled into the store, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. His eyes seemed even more glazed over, and his movements were more unsteady than usual. I watched as he grabbed his usual items and made his way to the counter, his gaze fixated on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Hey, Laura," he slurred, his voice barely coherent. "Hi, Frank," I replied, my voice trembling slightly as I rang up his items. As he handed me his money, his fingers brushed against mine in a way that felt deliberate, almost predatory. I quickly finished the transaction and handed him his change, my fingers trembling as I held out the coins. His gaze lingered on me, his lips curling into an unsettling grin. "You're a pretty one, Laura," he mumbled, his words laced with an unsettling mixture of alcohol and something more sinister. My heart raced, and I forced a smile, desperately trying to maintain a sense of professionalism. "Thank you, Frank. Is there anything else I can help you with tonight?" He leaned in closer, his alcohol-laden breath washing over me as he whispered, "You know, I've been watching you for a while now. You're different from the other girls." My breath caught in my throat, and I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "I appreciate your kind words, Frank, but I need to attend to other customers." I turned away, my hands trembling as I reached for a broom to busy myself with a task. I could feel his gaze on me, that unnerving intensity that seemed to bore into my very soul. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to be cautious, to stay away from him. As the night wore on, Frank eventually stumbled out of the store, leaving me with a sense of relief mixed with an undercurrent of dread. I locked the door behind him and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. But as I glanced out the window, I saw his figure lingering in the darkness, watching me from the shadows. Part of me wanted to call the police, to report his behavior and the way it made me feel unsafe. But another part of me hesitated, unsure if I was overreacting. I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't shake the feeling that Frank's presence was more than just that of a drunken regular. There was something about him that sent chills down my spine, something that hinted at a darkness I couldn't quite comprehend. Night after night, Frank's visits to the gas station became more frequent and his behavior more unsettling. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching my every move, studying me as if I were a puzzle he was trying to solve. The once familiar routine of my night shift had transformed into a tense game of avoidance and survival. I found myself glancing over my shoulder whenever a customer entered the store, half expecting to see Frank lurking in the shadows. Every time the door chimed, my heart would skip a beat, my eyes scanning for his disheveled figure. But as the days turned into weeks, there were moments when he wouldn't show up at all, and I would let out a sigh of relief, hoping that maybe he had moved on. One particularly chilly night, the gas station was quieter than usual. The wind howled outside, sending shivers down my spine as I watched the clock tick by. Just as I was about to start cleaning the coffee machine, the familiar chime of the door caught my attention. My heart sank as I turned and saw Frank stumbling in, his eyes bloodshot and his movements more unsteady than ever. "Evenin', Laura," he slurred, his words barely intelligible. "Good evening, Frank," I replied, my voice steady despite the unease I felt. I busied myself with organizing the shelves, hoping that he'd grab his items and leave without incident. As he stumbled through the aisles, his gaze fixated on me, I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. It was as if his eyes held a hunger that I couldn't quite understand, a hunger that made my skin prickle with discomfort. I watched as he grabbed his usual pack of cigarettes, a tall can of beer, and a bag of chips, his hands fumbling with the items. When he reached the counter, he leaned in closer than usual, his intoxicating breath washing over me. "You know, Laura, you're the only one who's ever really noticed me." I forced a smile, my fingers trembling slightly as I scanned his items. "I'm just doing my job, Frank." As I handed him his change, he took my hand in his grip surprisingly strong. "You're special, Laura. I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time." My heart raced, and I gently pulled my hand away, taking a step back. "Thank you, Frank, but I need to attend to other customers." He chuckled, his eyes glinting with a strange intensity. "Oh, I'll be back soon, Laura. You can count on that." With those words, he turned and stumbled out of the store, leaving me with a mixture of relief and apprehension. I locked the door behind him and took a deep breath, my mind racing with the weight of his unsettling words. There was something about his demeanor, something about the way he spoke, that made my instincts scream at me to be cautious. As I watched his figure disappear into the night, I realized that I couldn't ignore the feeling in the pit of my stomach any longer. It was time to take action, to ensure my safety and the safety of everyone who frequented the gas station. But deep down, I knew that Frank's presence was more than just that of a drunken regular. There was a darkness that clung to him, a darkness that had now infiltrated my once quiet nights.